Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this special bonus episode. If you haven't already guessed, the special guest today is me. And I decided to put myself on the hot seat. And it's already feeling kind of hot, even though I haven't even started yet. And this was very intentional in terms of like why I did this. But I'm going to pass it over to the person who is going to pretty much be like I don't know, I don't want to say interviewer, but pretty much be me and I'm the guest. So, and we're just going to kind of flow from here. Wasn't super planned on purpose so that I can be my open, vulnerable, transparent self. So I'm going to pass it over to Chris, who was a guest in the season earlier and who is a brother of mine and near and dear to my heart. So over to you, Chris.
Good day to everyone. I am happy to be here. I'm honored that you thought of me when you thought of this particular task, because it's one thing to be on this side, but it's another to be on that side. So
Yeah.
have to take special care. But yeah, it is a feeling of vulnerability, but to demonstrate how that process is, we have to see ourselves in that particular seat.
Yeah.
So that's important. Right? So how would we like to proceed? I guess the first question is, why, like, in your opinion, because you don't have to, why do this?
Why am I nervous? First of all. Anyways, everyone, I'm nervous. So this is real life. The reason I chose to do this was for very intentional reasons. Right now, I'm going through what I would like to call a kind of reconstruction process. I guess that's a word that I could use to describe it. And I feel like that's just part of my healing journey right now of kind of like deconstructing the ways that I have been in the past in terms of kind of just being super guarded. I don't really let people in that well. Chris knows that, being someone who knows me pretty well. And I tend to kind of, even though people are close to me, I still kind of have people like this, like at arm's length, if that makes sense. And that's just for various reasons, in terms of just different experiences that I've had throughout my life. But right now I'm in a space of, like I said, deconstructing and reconstructing, and in a space of like growth, doing the things that bring me fulfillment and happiness and joy. And I realized that sometimes part of that is doing things that are hard and difficult, because healing is not always rosy and peachy and nice, right? Sometimes it's a little messy. So I felt that in this process of this past season, of having people come on and really like share themselves and be open and transparent, that really inspired me. And I kind of had a thought like, why not put myself on the other side of that? And kind of be in a space where I can share with this community some of my perspectives and my experiences in a way that I haven't done before. I know in past seasons I have, shared a little bit about myself here and there, but mostly I would kind of choose a topic and just talk about it. And I might bring in like personal examples, but not in this kind of format. I haven't done this. So I felt like it was time to do that, as it also parallels with that kind of reconstructing process that I'm going through right now. I feel like I kind of blabbered. Does that answer your question?
Very good. I think you part of what you're talking about is the healing process, because I think most of the time you ask your guests, what does wellness mean to you? So I actually have a two-part question. All right, so Number one, what does wellness mean to you? But what does it also mean to heal?
Mhm. Okay. That's a good question. Okay, Chris. Um, to me, wellness means, I feel like the word itself says it, like to be well. And anybody who's in this community kind of knows the phrase that I use at the end, which is be well, do well, live well. And I think wellness just means anything that kind of brings you fulfillment. And I always like talk about just being able to be good with yourself, right? At the end of the day, being able to look in the mirror, being able to be with yourself and be happy with yourself. And do the things that bring you joy, be with people who bring you joy, and don't wait to be well or to be happy through other people, right? There's a quote that says, if you're looking for happiness elsewhere, it'll never be where you are, or something like that. Right. So sometimes we look for happiness and joy in other places and in things and in people. But to me, being well and wellness means to just kind of be good with you, be good with yourself, and do the things that, like bring you fulfillment, and understanding that that goes in ebbs and flows, right? You're not always going to be happy. Things aren't always going to go well. But when you are living in a state of wellness, you know that, when things aren't going well, it's temporary. It's not a permanent thing, right? So that's what wellness means to me. And as far as healing, I think healing is such a funny word. I feel like, because we talk about it, you throw it out there, oh, I'm healing. Or, if you're looking at it from a spiritual perspective, for those out there who are Christian, like, oh, I need to receive my healing, in this area. And to me, I always talk about this, especially at work with the people that I work with, that healing is a journey. It is not like a destination, like I'm healed and everything should just, like, even when we like accept Christ into our lives, right? People tend to think that in that same moment that everything, you're just going to be like this brand new person and no more hardship, no more battles. I'm just great now. So nothing should happen to me because everything should be perfect. And I think that's the same thing with healing. Like, it's a journey and it's a process that we kind of have to go through. And it's not something that is just it takes work, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Healing takes work. It takes work. And we have to be able to even recognize what needs healing in the first place. And I think sometimes it's hard to see that, when life happens. I know for me personally, I didn't realize that I needed healing in certain areas until the pain or whatever showed forth itself. Right. Yeah. So I didn't you don't know if something's hurting until you pay attention to it, I guess. So for me, I didn't know the areas that I needed healing until I was able to actually recognize it, if that makes sense.
How did you recognize it?
One of the biggest ways is my relationship with God. Showed me, and then also my relationship with people around me. And an area that I really needed one of the biggest healing with, I don't know how to say it, but was I have super deep trust issues, in terms, I was saying it earlier, letting people in and just kind of just being myself, just being I'm always on the edge, if that makes sense. So I rarely find people I can be around where I'm just and that's big. I know for other people, or maybe for some people listening to this, maybe that's just kind of simple for you, where you can just I'm gonna be myself unapologetically, and I'm just gonna show up as me. But I think there are some of us, myself, out there who that's not so simple for. To just kind of be yourself, let your guard down, say what's on your mind, uh, share parts of yourself with people, share your emotions with people. I think emotional safety is huge for me. That was an area that I needed healing in, to just feel emotionally safe around people, to just like be myself. I don't know. So I think my relationship with God helped me realize that. And just like trust issues when it comes to, like, for example, men. I'll just put that out there. And this guy right here is one of the people that God used to kind of help me to start to like have a level of trust, like, in men. Just because of like experiences that I've had in my childhood, growing up, where, you know, it was difficult, and I wasn't treated so well, by people who were supposed to love and care for me. So that in turn translated as I grew up. And I think that's what happens to a lot of us, where like, we experience something in our childhood, and just because we're getting older doesn't mean that those experiences are all of a sudden gone, right? Until we address it, it's just going to kind of be there. But I don't want to keep going on and on. But yeah.
Those experiences have a tendency to permeate, and when they're unchecked, they kind of impact multiple areas of your life. But
that's a good word, permeate. Ripple effect.
All right. I know one of the things that we talk about quite a bit is this idea of identity, right? And I noticed that you asked the question quite a bit. What do you think, in terms of identities that you have, are most important to you that that impact the work that you do?
That impact the work that I do. Identities are, well, I think one of my biggest identities that I really hold near and dear to me is, well, I guess they're kind of synonymous to me. Not like they're the same, but I feel like they just kind of go together in a way, which is being a Black woman. And because I feel like that's not an identity that I can necessarily like hide. There's some identities that unless the person tells you, you wouldn't know, like, oh, I'm a parent. Because you can't just look at someone and say, oh, you're a parent. But if you look at me, clearly, well, yeah, I don't know if it's clear, but you know what I'm trying to say. That's an identity that's important to me, especially with the work that I do as a therapist, because there's not that many of us out there in terms of, Black therapists, and especially in the setting that I work in. And for those that don't know, I work with incarcerated individuals, and most of my clients are men. And as we know, most of the individuals who are incarcerated are Black men. So over 90% of my clients are Black men, which again speaks to what I was talking about earlier about trust issues and men.
Yeah.
You see, I'm just going through this whole thing. It's like God is just like, okay, I'm really going to show you. And sometimes that's the thing with, not to digress, but I feel like that's sometimes the thing with healing too. Sometimes we find healing in places that are unexpected, I guess, or in places that, I don't know, we weren't thinking it was going to come through, if that's a word, or if that's how you say it. And sometimes it's very uncomfortable. And I feel like sometimes that's how you know you're healing, because it's touching a nerve. But yeah, so most of my clients are Black men. So I think my identity as being a Black woman, I think for a lot of them, it really holds great impact. When they see that, a lot of them say, oh, I've tried therapy before, but it was with some old, white person who couldn't really relate or connect with me. And just in our communities in general, I feel like as far as like mental health, is just not, it's getting better now, but it's just not something that we, explore and talk about, which I've talked about on this platform before. But yeah, that identity is very important to me. Being a Christian, my relationship with God, I'm someone who, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. And I try to really make a point of that, because I think religion in itself can be very traumatic. And people, tend to experience, I don't know, hardships when it comes to the word or the entity of religion and how man has set it up. But for me, my relationship with God is very important to me as an identity. Being someone who was born in Nigeria, being born in another country is an identity that's important to me, as far as like the integration of various like cultures that I've had to kind of step into. I feel like I can see multiple sides that not many have the privilege of seeing. So those are some identities that are important to me or that I carry.
You carried well.
Oh, thank you.
Fairly well. Yeah. All right. One of the people I can say practice what you preach 100%. Faith obviously is more than an identity. It's a value that is fundamental that I have seen for you. Are there any other values that continue to inform you on your journey?
That's a good one. Values. Yeah, I feel like core values are so important. And I think sometimes when we don't know what our values are, then our identity gets lost. I feel like that's when people say like, oh, I don't know who I am, I'm not sure of myself. I personally believe that it goes back to like values. And because when we know our values, we can know ourselves, right? So for me, some of my core values are, like my faith, my walk with God. I value trust. That's a value of mine.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that I'm learning is that some of the values that I have, it kind of birthed itself because of things that I lacked in my childhood. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So because I didn't have trust, in adults around me, that became a value of mine as I look into like relationships and friendships and how I connect to people. Honesty is a value of mine. Loyalty, having people's back. Community, not being an island. And connection is important to me. Empathy is important to me. And not sympathy necessarily, but empathy. I feel like there's a difference between being kind and being nice.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So empathy, compassion is important to me. I'm someone who I would always try to put myself in people's shoes, and try to see things from their perspective. And many times it has been a downfall, because when people say you're too understanding, and it's like, no, you should be mad at this person for doing. And I'm like, yeah, but maybe they're going through this, or maybe, this is what's happening for them. So let me. So while it's a value of mine, I'm working on like trying to make sure it's not working against me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, those are some of my values. Those are some of the things, especially community. In my recent like years, community and people and building like solid relationships has been very important to me, and sustaining it, not just building it, but like actually sustaining it. Because we sometimes build relationships, but it kind of just falls by the way if you don't, take care of it and nurture it.
When it comes to values, because you mentioned like values impact our identity quite a bit. The thing is, like when it comes to values, like everybody has them, even if you don't know it.
Yeah.
But you know it typically when you experience distress anyway. Because if
That's
you have a
true.
value connection and you find yourself lacking connection, that distress is coming from somewhere.
Yeah, that's true.
If your value is trust and you have been, if you feel like you've been betrayed or something in some way, that value is getting violated. So
Mm.
you experience it in some way. It impacts so many areas of our lives. But,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah. You have you've always been one of the most insightful people that I've ever met. But what? Because I've learned a lot from you. Let's be honest. I have. You got me through school. Let's be honest.
Well, thank you. I've learned a lot from you too. Wait, I'm supposed to just take the compliment. Ugh. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
working on that.
Oh
Sorry.
wow. Oh wow. Okay. Growth.
I've been doing
Growth.
some work, Chris. I've been doing some
Okay.
work. So I'm supposed to say thank you and just kind of let it instead of, because I have a tendency to give the compliment back or like, oh no, it's not a big deal. Okay, thank you. I'm receiving a
Yeah.
compliment. Thank you.
Because that speaks to like I owe something because I received something.
Yeah.
But what do you think you've learned about people and about yourself since you've been in this field, in this capacity anyway?
Ooh, that's a yeah, that's a good question. What have I learned? I think I've learned about people. We are all the same. And I know it sounds so simple and so like, okay, what? But that's one of the biggest things I've learned, like in this field, is that people are the same in the sense of like having the same needs and the same ways that they want to be seen and heard and cared for and valued, no matter like who they are or where they're coming from or what their background is. Because I think we take for granted, especially in this day and age, just sitting down and talking to somebody. Like, I feel like many of us don't really do that unless you're fortunate enough to have relationships where you just sit down and like have an exchange with someone where you feel safe and connected and they're kind of talking to you, you're talking to them and you're listening and you're checking in. And I feel like that's not normal. Unless maybe like you're in a great marriage. I feel like, that could be a thing. But as far as like even like friendships and parents and children and just human beings, I feel like we don't take into fact enough to just like really connect with one another. And I feel like being in this field has just shown me that the power in connection and just listening to someone is huge. Like just sitting down and just listening to someone. Like, tell me how you're doing. Tell me about your day. Tell me what's going on with you. And I think it's kind of sad that, in a way, kind of, that people have to like either pay a therapist, to do that for them or to be that space for them, which is not a bad thing. Because sometimes we need people that are outside of our immediate community to do that. But yeah, just the power in like connecting and just letting somebody just be. And I think this is coming up because of the setting I'm working in right now too. Because I'm trying to encapsulate it like with all the work that I've done so far, as far as like, we're working with foster youth before, and it's kind of the same too. Like kids just wanted somebody to just sit down and talk to them or play a game with them or color with them or just take them away from their usual, so, but I think the setting I'm working in right now is just making me like see that things could be just so simple. Like these are people who don't have their freedom. And the way that they appreciate the 1 hour, you would think that I did something phenomenal by just like, sitting there. And it's also the setting up, the place I work. is not the greatest. I'm not going to name it on here, but the resources is lacking. The mental health support is lacking. So because of that, the space that I'm able to provide for them is like a big deal because they don't really get anything. Like I'm working with like people in like max. So they're like in their cell like 22 hours a day, so it's like if they even get to come out that day, sometimes they don't get to come out at all. So you're in yourself for 24 hours in a day. And that's not good, but I'm not going to get into all that. But yeah, I think it's just making me realize that, and also context matters too. Mm-hmm. When it comes to people's stories or the things that we see, we have to know that context matters. And not everything that we see of a person is not the whole story. Yeah. And people have reasons why they do the things that they do. It might not be good, but they didn't get to where they are overnight. Yeah. It built up from somewhere, but I don't want to like keep talking. But yeah, that's something I've learned as far as like about people. And about myself, I had to take a minute to think about that. Now I've learned about myself. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot I've learned about myself. I guess that I can't do anything without God. Yeah. Not that I thought that before, but I think being a therapist just kind of really like swung that in my face, I guess, that I can't do anything without God and I'm nothing without God. Because when I show up to do the work that I do, I feel like people are seeing the God inside of me, and that's who they're interacting with. Without me even mentioning God, right? And I ask God to help me all the time. When I'm going into a session or I'm talking to someone, or when there's a client, it still happened this past week, who is just heavy on my heart. Just because of what, he's had to go through. And I have to spend a lot of time, like, interacting with God and asking God for guidance and help. And also just like, I guess refueling or recharging myself too. Because as you know, like this could be heavy work. Yeah. So I have to make sure that, because I feel like therapy is spiritual, at least from my perspective or my opinion. I think it's a spiritual transaction when you're sitting in front of someone. And they're kind of, and especially if they're really connected and you kind of are doing good work, I feel like it's very spiritual, and their energy and your energy kind of interacts, which is why sometimes as a therapist, if you have like clients who are struggling with like depression and anxiety, if you're not checking yourself, you'll find yourself after the sessions, you'll feel down. You'll be like, what's going on? Like my energy's off. Or my anxiety's up, or what is happening right now? So, and that's because of that energy transaction that's happening in the room in real time. So I always have to make sure that I stick to my morning routines, for example, that I do before I go to work, or just every day in general, to really make, and also at night too, when I come home, like that I'm not carrying, my clients like stuff. Yeah. That I'm just kind of, leaving it. I can hold it, I can pray for them, or I can kind of think about them, but I'm not like putting it on myself, I guess. But yeah, to answer your question, that's one thing I've learned, that I can't do anything without God. I'm nothing without God. I don't like to call myself self-made. I like to say that I'm God-made, um, because I don't feel like I'm, in the sense, I'm not special. I'm not saying, I don't know how to say it. Like, I'm not different than anybody else, is what I'm trying to say, in terms of like what I'm doing. But what makes me stand apart is God. You know, it's just the grace of God and the favor of God. So, and I talk a lot is one thing I've learned too. I talk a lot. I talk too much.
Yeah.
Because clearly I just answered your question in like 5 minutes.
But that's okay, because it shows that people are not surface level, right?
Yeah.
I think you mentioned couldn't do anything without God and the grace that He's given you, but it seems like even in where you work specifically, it seems like you give that grace yourself. Being able to listen to some people that, let's be honest, society kind of turns their back on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I've told two of my friends before, like, those are the people God has called me to, and I know. And that's why I just kind of have to make sure that in everything I do, I prioritize my relationship with God, because I feel like God has called me to people that no one wants to work with or no one wants to deal with. Kind of like, where we used to work.
Yeah.
We worked with kids who, were the toughest of the tough, like that nobody wanted to deal with. Or you talk about working with foster, like, and now I'm, working with people you can call criminals, that people will call criminals. And I'm sitting across from someone who has killed someone, like, and I'm like listening to what he's saying, and I have complete empathy and compassion for this person and these people, and not excusing anything that they've done, that it's right, but just understanding that there's context.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't end up where they are overnight. People really go through things, and stuff happens, so yeah.
When because clearly it can weigh on you, right?
Yeah.
What do you think drives you, motivates you to continue to keep going? Because look, there's sometimes I'm like, did I pick the right field,
man?
So what is the driving force that continues to do that?
Yeah, because sometimes I'm like, yeah, I could just have an office job somewhere and just like, or I could learn how to be in tech. That's making a lot of money right now. Like, I could do that, clearly I'm not the only one, Chris, because you probably feel like that too. Because it's a hard field, man. It's hard. It's hard out here. I think for me, what keeps me going is that's your question, right? Like, what keeps me going? What keeps me it's just a purpose. I don't know. Like, this is my purpose. And I feel like no matter where I end up working, I was telling, I think, my supervisor this a little while back. Like, it's not really about the setting for me. It's more of the work. So I could be working where I am now or somewhere else. I just have to feel like I'm doing work that matters, that's connected to my purpose, which is impacting people and making a difference in people's lives, small, big, medium, whatever that means, if it's just one interaction. So purpose keeps me going. And also, like, leaving work at work, to be honest.
Leaving work at work. Okay.
Just leaving work at work. Because that was a struggle for me at our last job. Because it was hard to separate work and life. And I think for me, my tender spot is kids. And Chris knows this. This is my soft spot. So I think whenever I do end up working with kids again, I think by that time I would have gotten more time under my belt and hopefully like more self-care practices and things like that so that I can be able to kind of manage it better. Yeah. But leaving work at work keeps me going because once I leave, I'm not thinking about work in that kind of capacity. It's not keeping me up at night. Like, yo, kids used to be in my dreams.
Yes.
You too, right, Chris?
Yes.
You see them here, you wake up, you're thinking about them as you're getting ready in the morning. Like, how can I help this kid? Especially when you have a work phone, you got a work laptop. And then we were working from home at that time because it was a pandemic.
Yeah.
So there was really no separation on top of that. So I think just being able to have like that balance now keeps me going because I can leave work at work, focus on my self-care, connect with people around me, kind of refuel myself as far as like self-care. Because you can't pour from an empty cup, like people like to say. And yeah, that keeps me going. And honestly, it's the grace of God. It's God too that keeps me going.
You mentioned the cup, right?
Yeah.
Because we talk about self-care and getting people to kind of fill their cups. So what type of things do you do? Because you mentioned like leaving work at work, but you know, for some people that's easier said than done. So like what type of things do you do to cultivate wellness?
Yeah, I definitely know that it's easier said than done. Like I was just saying, I struggled with leaving work at work for a long time. It wasn't really until this job, which I started last June. So it hasn't been that long. So I understand for those out there who struggle with that, I completely get it. Especially if you're doing work that is very stressful. It's hard to just leave it and just once you clock out, you're done. But what fills my cup? So what do I do to fill my cup, right? That's the question. Is practical things I do. So like I said, once I leave work, I'm like tuned into other things. So the good thing with this job is I don't have like a work phone or like a work computer. So that makes it a little bit easier to just like transition away. And then because I have other responsibilities too, like with church, that kind of helps me too with like, okay, well, I'm checking out of this job and I'm kind of checking in to this service that I'm doing, or this job that I have to do. So that helps. And then I've just started to have a routine since last year. Yeah, since January last year, February. I started I have a morning routine. I think I mentioned it earlier that I stick to my morning routine. And I noticed that when I don't do it, my day is thrown off. So my morning routine is I wake up and I have this devotion that I'm using again. I used it last year, but I'm using it again, which is called Jesus Calling. It's pretty good. So I do that. I pray. I play worship music while I'm like doing everything I need to do. And in a perfect world before, I would have time to work out in the morning. But I'm getting to that. I haven't started doing that yet, but I'm getting there. Because I used to do that. I would work out, I would make good breakfast. And now I have a dog, so I got to take care of my dog. So I stick to my morning routine because that kind of helps with like getting the day started. And then my night routine, as far as like leaving work at work, is now that I don't have a long drive because I work close to where I live. Once I like get home, I play some relaxing music. What I've been into lately is lo-fi. If you don't know it, get into it. Play lo-fi or I play some jazz just to relax. I always make sure I take a shower because it's kind of like washing the day off for me. Right. So just like whatever helps you, and then, I'll connect with whoever I need to connect with. I love my shows that I like to watch. So I watch my shows, so whatever helps you to like just kind of decompress. If it's talking to somebody, for me personally, because I'm an introvert. So if you're an introvert out there and you've been talking to people all day, you've been dealing with people all day, taking in people's stuff all day, you want to recharge by being to yourself. So for me, it helps me to like be to myself, re-pour back into myself and kind of like, but for some people, maybe you're an extrovert and you like to like talk to people. So then call your friend and kind of chit chat. But for me, I got to be by myself because it's exhausting when you're an introvert. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Understood. I like to have my space as well,
Mm-hmm.
but I think like even like detailing some of the things you do, because I think that's the one thing when it comes to people who are really empathetic or people who are very like yes oriented people, meaning and they take on, take on, take on, take on. And then by the end of the day, you got drops left in your cup and
Yeah.
and then you expect to have that being sustainable, and it's clearly not. And then you see people wearing down.
Yeah.
But being able to be able to understand and that, that comes down to setting even boundaries for yourself, just making
Mm-hmm.
sure that you have something left to
Yeah.
continue to refill your own cup.
Yeah.
Um,
Boundaries are huge. Boundaries are huge. Yeah.
huge, huge.
Yeah.
So like I guess what two questions left. That's
Okay.
the first one is like now that you've been in the field, what are your hopes for your journey? Your hopes to be able to impact whoever you're going to impact. But what are your hopes for this journey?
My hopes for this journey is to just continue to make impact, honestly. And continue to work with people and show up for people and be an advocate for people and provide space for people that have been pushed to the side.
Yeah.
So those are the people that I'm passionate about. People that are marginalized, people that no one wants to work with, people that are called difficult, and to just make impact. And to also continue for myself to grow through that, That's one of my favorite quotes is to grow through what you go through.
Grow through what you go through. Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes. So because growth is important to me. Like I don't do anything if I can't grow. Like, you know how I am. I'm kind of a little bit of type A. Yeah. So if I don't have a challenge or if I feel like I'm not growing, it's gonna be like, what am I doing? Or I find ways to like challenge myself. So growth for me is important. Just making impact. So as long as I'm also growing through that journey too, I feel like that's really my hope. And to just like kind of, continue to trust God and depend on God with everything that I'm doing. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Grow through what you go through. All right.
Yeah.
So now that we look to the future, we kind of look present. I like to rewind and go to the beginning. To the beginning.
Okay.
How did you start this anyway? Like, what was the light bulb that says, I'm gonna do this?
Do what?
Therapy.
Oh, to be a therapist?
Yeah. What was the?
Oh, I've shared it I shared that like on season 1, I think. But okay. Since maybe there are people listening or watching that probably don't know that story.
What was the light bulb? What was the light? Because you like to fluff the story. What was the?
I didn't fluff anything. It wasn't really a light bulb. It was just I just feel like this is what God called me to do. So what happened was, so we all know mental health wasn't super popular. And if you like go to other countries, it's not a huge thing. I feel like here in America, it's big. But in most other countries, I can't speak to every single country, but I know the country that I'm coming from is not, super, what do you call it? Popular, or a thing that people do or talk about. So I took a psychology class in my junior year of high school. And it was just fascinating to me. I was like, oh, wow, this is quite interesting. Because I've always been someone who like observes people and like kind of watch. And again, it's probably coming from my experiences of like keeping people like that. Mm-hmm. So I like to just sit back and observe and kind of see how people are and try to understand. I could remember from a young age as being like that. Like I just kind of sit back and just kind of watch. So the class was very fascinating for me. And it was just cool. And then that summer, because I got into this leadership program that I was doing that whole school year, because one of my teachers recommended me, whatever. Anyways, so I got like a scholarship, and and I also had to raise some money, and then we went to Nicaragua for about 3.5 weeks, close to a month. I was there with my group, and it was a really cool experience. We volunteered, we taught English. At that time, my Spanish was better because you had to have 3 years of Spanish to go on that trip. And I had 3 years of Spanish under my belt, and my Spanish was, because a lot of the people, I could only speak Spanish to them, and my Spanish was just going. But now, see, when you don't use something, guys, it goes away. But my Spanish was good. I taught English. We taught English 3 times a week. We did stuff with the local kids. It was just a cool experience. And then there was one particular day that we went to the city dump. So the city dump was kind of like, so going back again to people that nobody wants to work with, nobody wants to be. So that was my first, I feel like one of my first experiences of being where most people didn't want to go. Because not everybody on that trip wanted to go to the dump. Because it was they made it voluntary for us. So like, because they kind of let us know that, okay, this is what you're gonna see, this is what's gonna happen. It's gonna be very smelly. You're not gonna want to cover your mouth because people live here. Like, this is where they, reside. They have like, their shelter here, and you're gonna see animals, and so they really prepared us, and like, we're gonna make it optional. Some of us want to go there and drop off school supplies. And stuff for the kids there. So if you want to go, you can go. But if you don't want to go, it's not a big deal. Everything else was mandatory for us to do, but not that. So I was like, I want to go. I want to see what this is like. So that was one of my first experiences of like, oh, wow. Like, these are people who are kind of like pushed to the side. Like, they're literally living in the city dump. So like, you would see like the trash trucks come and dump the trash, like where they were living. And you would see kids running around. I saw one kid fighting, I think it was like a goat or something for food. It was really sad. It was a really sad sight. And it was in that moment that I kind of felt the sense of, I don't want to call it aha. It wasn't like a deep voice spoke to me, you know how to say, I heard the voice of God. It wasn't really like that. For me, my experiences with God have always been like I don't want to call it a feeling, but a sense, like something, because I don't know how to explain it, but maybe people out here know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so it was like this sense of like, you're gonna work with, it was kids at the time. You're gonna work with kids that people don't want to work with. And this is what you're gonna do. Like, this is clearly your passion, because that day I was moved to tears. Like, I was crying. And it wasn't a crying of like, oh, how sad, I feel so bad for them. It was like a crying of like, my heart was pulling to do more. Like, I wanted to stay there. I wanted to get them more supplies. I wanted us to come back the next day and do X, Y, and Z. Like, it was that kind of crying. Like, and I think sometimes that's where our passion is in the things that kind of move our hearts. And that's the area that you need to find a solution in, is the area that kind of aches your heart, I guess. So that's really the story. And then I took another psychology class that my senior year. And I was like, I'm a major in psychology, and I'm going to be a therapist, and there's so many kids that need help. And I ended up working, where we used to work, and the rest is history. So it wasn't necessarily like therapy, but it was just more like helping people, which is why I say like, this is my purpose. So maybe I'm not always gonna, I don't want to like, what do you call it? But it's just, I feel like everything that I'm doing in my life, as far as like career wise, is just pieces to a puzzle that has nothing to do with necessarily therapy. It's just more of like impacting and doing things for people that people don't want to be around, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's not necessarily, my purpose isn't therapy, my purpose isn't to be a therapist. My purpose is impact. So it's not always going to be therapy. It could be like, I'm a, open this community center, for these group of people or something like that. So, yeah.
For the record, we have had a lot of conversations. Never once have I heard that story.
Christopher Pearsall.
Never
so that means,
once
so that means do you listen to my podcast?
I listen to your podcast, but never once have I heard that story.
Really?
Never once have I heard that story.
Maybe I'm one. Okay, everybody should say in the comments. Do you remember me sharing this story in season 1? Or maybe I'm tripping. Maybe I didn't share it, Chris.
There are layers to you.
Okay, everybody should say if they heard the story before. Who's heard this story before? If you heard this story before, comment, I heard it before. If you haven't.
Never heard the story.
Yeah.
And even if I had, I would still,
Oh, don't do that. So you have heard it?
No, that's not what I said. I said even if I had,
you forgot.
It would still, I think you and I both.
Maybe it's the way I said it this time.
You and I both share this idea that when we think about legacies, right?
Yeah.
It's never in buildings or professions. It's always in people.
Yep.
And impacting lives. So absolutely. But that's the first time I've heard that, and I appreciate you allowing me to hear it, even if it is again. I doubt it is, but even if it is,
we're gonna have to bet on it. You want to bet? You want to bet?
No.
Okay.
No. No. I'm not betting because then
because I'm gonna win. Because I know
that is not what I said.
I remember stuff. I don't forget things.
I just don't want to take your money.
No, it doesn't have to be money. We can bet like something else.
No friendly bets either.
Okay, fine.
Whatever. But I thoroughly enjoyed this because
me too.
You are a fantastic listener, but often to hear you, sometimes as a young African American male who was raised by a lot of older women, one of the things I learned to do is just sit at the feet of older women, older men too, but I was raised by older women, and just listen to the story. You have that energy to be able to just listen to and absorb information from. Wise beyond your years. It's unfortunate because sometimes the reason why we're wise beyond our years is because we've gone through stuff to make you wise beyond your years. But definitely have that energy. And I thank you thoroughly for allowing me to participate. It has been awesome.
Oh, thank you, Chris. You pretty much called me old, but okay.
Old soul.
I'm kidding. I have to say, this was a really, really weird for me and uncomfortable. I'm just going to be honest. Because I feel like the only time I feel like this is when I've done therapy in the past, which I'm trying to get back into. It's hard to find a therapist out here, y'all. That's another topic.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'm looking for a Black female therapist, not just like any therapist. But yeah, this was very uncomfortable for me. I'll just be honest. And it just felt really weird to keep talking. Cause usually, like you said, I'm someone who I give space for people, even when it's like, oh, it's okay. Tell me how you're doing. Oh, I'm fine. How are you? And then I'll listen to how you're doing. And then we'll end up talking about how you're doing. Cause Chris knows. He knows. So I really appreciate you just letting me just talk, because I don't do this. I realize this now that even with friends that I have, I tend to put it back on them, and then they end up talking, and it's kind of like a defense mechanism. Not because they don't care about how I'm doing, but because I don't allow myself to do that most times. Yeah. So just sitting here talking and just talking, because I think I said it. I was like, I feel like I'm talking too much. But it's this is what this was for me to talk.
That's what it was for.
But it was just, I don't know. It was very uncomfortable. And I feel like also it was much needed.
Yeah.
And it's putting a lot of things into perspective for me. And I appreciate you for being open to doing this and for being someone that I can just talk with, because I purposely chose you, so it was intentional.
It's fun when your friends are therapists.
Isn't it? Yeah. Thank you, Chris. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining in and tuning in. I hope you got something out of this episode. And I, what am I trying to say? Yeah, I hope you got something from this episode. See, nervousness. I'm still nervous. I don't know why. I hope you got something from this episode. And I hope it was cool for you to kind of hear, some of my experiences and some of the things that I struggled with, still working through, whatever. And if you want me to do this again, because I would love to, please let me know. Let me know what you got out of it. And we'll be back with more episodes. Deuces. Hey community, thank you so much for tuning into the episode today. I know that you got something out of it, so don't forget to leave all your comments, questions, and reflections from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe as we continue to build this community together. And also turn on your notifications so that you know when every episode drops. Thank you all so much again, and until we meet again, continue to be well, do well, and live well.